The next presentation is by Estelle. The article title is Repositioning Traditional Craft, Knowledge, Affect and Social.
Thank you, Professor Patanayak. Thank you again to Centurion University and our eminent guests for inviting us here. We appreciate being here very much. And once again, I acknowledge the traditional people of this land and I thank them for a wonderful evening that we had last night. This paper is a little bit truncated from a longer paper, so if it seems a little bit disjointed, I hope to present you with a full paper after the conference. So craft making and craft objects play different roles in Western and traditional cultures, and hence craft cannot be understood outside of the cultural conditions in which it is made. In the West, industrial manufacturing and mass production that took hold in the 19th century overshadowed traditional artisans and the value given to objects they produced. However, a resurgence of craft soon emerged as an attempt to restructure creative labour and regain a romanticised pre-industrial past as a response to the industrialisation in Europe. However, however, a resurgence of craft soon emerged, and in traditional cultures, a different picture emerges. In such societies, geography, climatic and other environmental conditions, as well as customs and belief systems, determine the kind of materials available for manufacture and the kinds of objects that are needed or desired. Art in traditional societies and everyday life are more closely aligned. The making of objects is ritualized, and the design, symbols, and uses of craft objects often operate as an expression of shared identity. In this sense, we may speak of relational craft, since craft in such contexts operates not only in terms of its use function, but as a mode of preserving, extending, and transmitting social relations and knowledge that would otherwise be lost. This includes environmental, ecological, technical, traditional and cultural knowledge, and also a more profound kind of knowledge, tacit knowledge, which includes the skill derived from making and using craft objects that cannot be fully conveyed through language and therefore escapes documentation. This unspoken knowledge constitutes intersubjective knowing and affective relations that are deeply connected to the places of dwelling and the material realities from which they emerge. Hence, simply documenting, appropriating, copying, or exporting traditional creations for commodity consumption and other purposes is not a guarantee of preservation of the integrity of cultural practices predicated on experiential connection to place and people. Ongoing and evolving practice in situ is also a crucial element in the maintenance of material thinking of those and the preservation of those knowledges derived from skill in the making. In this paper, I will attempt to outline how the cohering of different domains of knowledge constitute a mode of doing and being that does not homogenize but rather constitutes both collective and individual identities that at a certain level may be understood through the notion of lifestyle. Such a term allows us to go beyond articulating only those tangible, externalized and material aspects of culture, but also their attendant affects, values and belief systems that inform the practices of everyday life from generation to generation. Crucial to the emergence of identities are geographical location and the environment that are subject to change over periods of time. The imperative to respond to both permanent and shifting conditions of social and physical space involves ongoing processes of cultural production that preserve and perpetuate tradition, whilst at the same time involve dynamic and constantly evolving practices. Contemporary influences can be grafted onto traditional forms of knowledge in ways that do not erase or replace traditional forms, but allow innovations to emerge that are nevertheless particular and situated, and more importantly, that are enabling. However, in some isolated Filipino cultural communities, for example, from the highlands, weavers and carvers are still barely influenced by the outside world. Their craft, and we can see some there, their craft productions are grounded in the pristine patterns influenced by a close connection to nature. All the materials come from plants, the symbols come from the flora and the fauna in the areas. The materials, dyes and motifs that are features of such productions are reflections of the natural environment and the social practices that are rooted within it. These traditional craft makers share an intimate knowledge of the resources and techniques of making and specific ritual uses of their craft, all of which remain largely unchanged in those very rare areas. However, with colonization and globalization, the notion of an untouched or an unadulterated culture has become an anachronism, as I will illustrate in more detail later in this paper. Before this, though, I would like to discuss the connection between relational craft and relational knowledge. My area of interest in research is the production of knowledge and how knowledge is produced and transmitted. And so I'm looking at the craft object now in terms of a new way of looking at knowledge. In his book, Relational Aesthetics, Nicholas Barrett suggested that art, and by extension craft, can be understood as participatory, in that it involves interactions with objects that also engender and affect social encounters. This is so because the audiences of art are integral to the way in which art objects articulate the meanings and articulate the affects or emotions that they produce. They also articulate values and the uses that the art object embodies. The audience then is really crucial when we're talking about these objects. The maker's practice and approach to making also determines the kinds of relationships that may be formed with the work. Hence, according to Barrett, the object may be viewed as separate from capitalist exchange because it actually does work that is not absolutely tied to consumption and the marketplace. What the craft maker and the artist produces is first and foremost relations between people and the world by way of aesthetic objects. That was a quote. Barrett's work suggests that the West is just beginning to catch up with many non-Western societies' conceptions of the role of aesthetic objects. In such societies, the notion of relationality is imbricated in all aspects of life. How can we articulate more clearly the way relationality through craft operates as a central mechanism in the forging of individual and collective identity? Drawing on Barrett's thinking and then going beyond his primarily social focus, I suggest that the key to this is a deeper understanding of the dimension of knowledge that I posit as relational knowledge. Knowledge as action and interaction. Here, knowledge operates or can be understood not only as a noun, but also as a verb, because it is predicated on interaction and process. Such knowledge emerges through the logic of practice, embodied or intuitive knowledge, as opposed to the knowledge of rational thought and language. I've talked about this elsewhere in the logic of practice in other publications, so I won't dwell on it. In his influential work, Knowing and Being, Michael Polanyi asserts that there is an implicit dimension of knowing that he theorizes through the notions of tacit and personal knowledge. Polanyi argues that all knowledge is fundamentally tacit since it includes more than what we can tell. A wholly explicit knowledge, he says, is unthinkable, systematically misleading, and culturally destructive. Colonizers who either deny or try to capture and commodify such knowledge put cultural diversity and specificity at risk. Preserving the integrity of traditional craft practices is therefore central to resisting the erasure of culture and identity. An understanding of the link between relational craft and tacit or relational knowledge helps to eliminate this further. Craft making operates not only on the basis of explicit and exact knowledge, but also on that of tacit and experiential knowledge and skill derived from interaction with objects in the world and within a specific environment. And I'll pause here to say that we had an example of this in the special machine workshop where we were told that the students who were making the aeronautic parts had to get it to within 1/100th of accuracy. And the only way they can actually reach that accuracy is through practice. Practice and practice and practice. And through that practice, they gain that intuitive knowledge that no amount of writing or theory or instruction can give them. So that's the kind of knowledge that we're talking about. Such practices are therefore always contextual and situated. The key to understanding the relationship between experience, practice, and knowledge is the notion of sense activity. Here I'm reminded of Angelica Pillar's a notion of revealed knowledge that she talked about yesterday. Consider learning to ride a bicycle, for example. It is impossible to tell another person everything he or she needs to know to ride a bike. Only practice and experience will result in attaining such skill. Once this skill is attained, however, the learner becomes part of a specific group of people who are connected through shared knowledge that cannot be fully grasped by others who have not yet learned to ride a bike. We can understand this shared knowledge as relational knowledge. Derived through interacting action with objects in the world, it distinguishes a group of people on the basis of tacit knowledge that is situated in ways of doing and ways of being, and also confers upon individuals in that group an aspect of their identity. For example, she is a weaver, he is a didgeridoo player, and so on. Thus, destruction of traditional craft practices not only results in a loss of knowledge, but also destroys the links and relationality upon which social identity relies, and by extension, the social cohesion upon which individual well-being is founded. And we see this, the wonderful cohesion in those dances. You have that sense of social cohesion here that we've destroyed amongst our Aboriginal people because we took them away from their children. They don't know who they are. And also, of course, we destroyed many of their practices. Okay, how am I going for time? A little bit more? 5 minutes? Yes? 5 minutes, okay. Okay. So, as already noted above, this is not to suggest that traditional art and craft practices are frozen in time, but rather that they emerge according to changes in local and environmental conditions and through shared practices that are both enabling and sustaining. They don't have to stay the same. What they do need to do is be sustaining and enabling. Also, this does not result in a denial of individuality. We may turn again to Polyani, who explains this through his account of personal knowledge. For each of us, learning to ride a bike or making a craft object is a unique experience that relies on the length of our legs or the length of our fingers, other physical and cognitive capacities that we have, as well as the nature of the materials themselves. Then there is the place of practice, the terrain in which the riding occurs, which may vary from person to person. Hence, each of us develops an additional layer of tacit knowledge that can be understood as personal knowledge, knowledge that is confined to our own making and to our own specific experience. This determines our particular style of making or way of riding a bike. And in the case of craft makers, it is maybe what distinguishes a master craftsman from others. Variability and heterogeneity sustains the social dynamism and the responsiveness to change that leads to innovation. In traditional practices, we may argue that this accounts for how Indigenous peoples are able to evolve and innovate in ways that benefit their communities. Now, I want to quickly turn to relational knowledge and contemporary practice in Indigenous art and craft. In Australia, contemporary Indigenous artists are sometimes overlooked because of market demand for so-called authentic Aboriginal art. However, as Sylvia Kleinhardt observes, cross-cultural practices offer a broader, more inclusive framework for contemporary art and craft in southeastern Australia. This framework illuminates how contemporary practice by Indigenous artists is helping to recuperate and reinvigorate Indigenous culture and identity. So if we can go now, we can see the possum skin cloak. And can we go to the next one? The song lines are drawn into burnt into the backs of the cloak. And these cloaks are worn for special ceremonial purposes. Have we seen the lady in the cloak? So you saw the lady in the cloak. The wearing of the cloaks was circumscribed by traditional ceremonial and cultural practices that predated colonial settlement. Today, however, the wearing of cloaks brings Aboriginal culture into visibility. The makers and weavers of cloaks are notable people from the community, and because processes of identity formation involve a mirroring and an identification with others, seeing people in public places wearing the traditional garb helps to create a pride of identity and a cohesion of identity. So many times now in modern Australia we see these cloaks being worn at the opening of the Commonwealth Games, at the opening of Parliament and so on. So I'll just quickly try and finish this section about that. In February 2008, Ngangari Noongarwal elder Matilda House dressed in a possum skin cloak and performed the first Indigenous welcome to country, slide 5, keep going down, that's it, for the opening of the Australian Parliament in Canberra. And then Prime Minister Kevin Rudd apologised to the stolen generations. This event marks the way in which the use of ritual artefacts changes in response to changing social and political landscapes. The possum skin cloak, a ceremonial item of clothing, is also a crucial means of ensuring that the stories, practices and knowledge of the past are preserved through those storylines that are burnt into the back of the skins. Today, however, Indigenous artists demonstrate how both traditional and contemporary forms can operate to revitalise and restore culture and at the same time articulate contemporary sensibilities. So we have artists now such as Jennifer Murray-Jones and other contemporary artists who are preserving aspects of their culture, but they're also responding to the contemporary demands of their practice. So, at the time of before settlement, dress was part of at the time of settlement, dress was part of the civilising process used by the colonisers and colonial officials who imposed government-issue clothing on Aboriginal people. Within decades of settlement, traditional clothing, including the possum skin cloak, had almost completely disappeared, endangering a crucial object through which this knowledge was transmitted. And as you've seen in the examples that I've shown you, people continue to preserve those, not only by using them in a traditional way, but also by taking those motifs and using them in a contemporary way. So if we can move on to the next slides. So, however, when people do use these, this is a contemporary rendition of the back of the cloak, which is done through a contemporary process. Move to the next slide, thank you. And here we've got an artist who's taken the notion of the cloak and has actually made a different kind of art with rusted corrugated iron. And this corrugated iron represents perhaps some of the humpies or the sheds where these people dwelt in their camps. And the back of that piece of work, which is a 2D work, is covered in something akin to possum skin cloaks. So this piece of contemporary art is not only preserving the traditional culture, it's operating as a new aesthetic, but it's also operating critically. It's operating in a critical way by twinning the possum skin with the corrugated iron. In other words, contemporary art and craft making and uses of ritual art objects that incorporate traditional motifs can become a means of addressing the unresolved histories of the colonial past, and hence be a way of self-performatively taking control of representations, of dominant representations. Hence they operate as a form of political action and contribute to social and cultural recuperation and also cohesion. Seen in relational and processual terms, art and craft making becomes a means of intervening in dominant discourses of Aboriginality, an engagement that involves imagining a future and finding new ways of articulating affective connections both between people and people, and place and people. I have another section on talking about emotions and affect, but I think my time is up, so I will stop there. Thank you.